Hi there, and welcome to another in my series for cinematographers. Well, I've been shooting films for over 30 years professionally, broadcast documentaries and dramas, but this is where I like to informally just talk about the craft that I've learnt. And wherever I can, I use examples that I've shot myself, just because those are the ones that I know most about, where the lights are, which lenses we've used, and what's motivated the camera to move or not to move. Plus there's all sorts of other little tips and tricks that I'll throw in, which don't make it to the textbooks, but they always seem to affect the way a scene is shot on the day. So there'll be something for you wherever you are on your journey into the camera department, be it a trainee, an assistant, an operator, or even a DOP in your own right. I just wanted to kind of talk about the way that you can learn to visualize and how you begin to do that. Some of you, I'm sure a lot of you, have already started to do that as you became filmmakers, and maybe with stills photography, even drawing, painting. Maybe some of you are into that. It's a great way to learn to observe, by the way, drawing and painting. You don't have to be very good at it, but it really does make you focus on the scene and the light and the shapes that are in front of you. So I just want to talk a little bit about a sort of painterly approach to cinematography, and then beyond that I'll show you some practical ways which I find useful in terms of how to kind of get a set of lenses inside your head, and then you can kind of walk around, and whatever you view you can kind of put a lens on, as if you're changing a lens on your third eye and visualizing the scene in a way that cinematographers do. So I'm just going to kind of amble through this, try and stay awake if you can. I called it Ways of Seeing because I think it's about how we as filmmakers, but particularly as cinematographers, see the world in a way that other people perhaps don't or haven't learned to, and that then becomes something for us to translate onto the screen so that we can show other people what we see. So what I want you to do is to start to see yourselves as painters, as great painters. Your canvas is woven from pixels. Your brushes are forged out of glass. Or the paint you apply is light itself. And most importantly, the scenes that you depict, well, they're going to be a revelation to the world. Great paintings do that, and great films do that. So let's just have a little look at some painters. Some of you may recognize this familiar face. This is Rembrandt, one of the great masters. Imagine what he could have done if film had been invented in his day. But of course he was born in 1606, so just a couple of years older than me. But let's have a look at some of his work. This is one of his early works, and it's called The Supper at Emmaus. And for those of you who know the story, it'll inform your understanding of the picture. And those of you who don't know the story, the picture will inform your understanding of the story. So let's just talk through it a little bit. As cinematographers, as painters, you can see as a painter in 1626 or whenever this was painted, Rembrandt is concerned with light and dark, and you can see where he's placed the lights. And here, if you look where he's placed his, let's call it his key light, the most important light in the picture, which dictates how everything else is lit or unlit. And he's placed a light between this character and the wall. And then he's done the same thing, I think arguably here, or he's just put it to the right and he's put it behind, I don't know, a box or something. It's probably a little candle, oil lamp, I expect. And it's just catching the edge of that figure's outline and then throwing past her that little glow onto the wall, which outlines that figure's back as they stoop forward, doing whatever they're doing. Probably preparing food, I guess. It's called the supper at Emmaus. So, of course, this is the supper where the action's taking place. And this light here, which illuminates the wall, this key light, we're going to call it, is placed behind this character, and it turns him into a silhouette, a black shape, a cut-out figure. And there's a reason why he's done that. And there is a reason why we would do that as cinematographers. Maybe you want to hide something about that character. Maybe you want to keep an aspect of them mysterious. And interestingly, that same light that he's placed, that same key light that's shrouding this figure in darkness, the same light is illuminating this figure here with a bounced soft light off that wall. And that enables us, obviously, to study that figure, to study that character, to get some insight into that character. And you can see, if you spend some time looking at this, you can go back and do that later, that he looks shocked. He's in disbelief. It's kind of as if he was sitting there to have his own supper with his wife, maybe, with a friend in the back of the shop there. And this figure has appeared out of nowhere, and you can see his shock. As I say, if you know the story, you'll know this figure is Christ after he's been crucified on the cross. So theoretically, he's dead. And yet here he is turning up at this supper table in a place called Emmaus. That's why this guy who knows him looks so horrified and shocked. I don't know, maybe he went to the funeral. How would you feel if you went and buried somebody, went home for supper, and the guy you just buried turned up to share your beans on toast? Disturbing. Very simple use of light. And you'll know, as painters, as people who paint with light, that really a lot of the art of placing lights is really about what you don't light, what shadows you cast, and what effects those shadows have on the mood of the picture, or the mood of the scene, or the mood of the film. And it's given a metaphorical significance here, because the light is, as we've said, shadowing this figure. This figure is technically a dead person, the blackness of death. And yet he's appeared at this supper table. And you can see how Rembrandt has drawn a line down through the centre of this frame. And half of it is light and half of it is in darkness. The figure seated at the table looking at this ghostly apparition is right on the dividing line between lightness and darkness. He's just edging into the light so that we can see him. But see how that vertical runs down right behind him to give that compositional strength. So he's torn, it's a metaphor, darkness and light. Do I believe in this rebirth, or do I stay in the darkness? So it's a religious metaphor. In fact, you can say it's divided in two and you've got 50% light, 50% dark, but actually if you kind of quarterize this canvas here, you can see that a great mass of this quarter is taken up with the darkness of that figure. So, I don't know, I haven't done the maths on this, how would you? But I guess we're kind of 65, 70% darkness in this frame. 30%, 35% is illuminated. Two lights, very carefully placed. That's all that Rembrandt has used. In some ways, the fewer lights you use, the easier it is, if you put them in the right place. This is a very different picture in some respects. It's painted a couple of hundred years later, 1808. And if the other one was a drama, maybe this is a documentary, perhaps a war documentary. It's about the Spanish army in occupation, and it's a firing squad. It's a horrific scene, and in its day, 1808, very few people would paint scenes like this in this way. That's why it's a remarkable painting by the Spanish painter Francisco Goya. It's set at night time. Why would he choose to set it at night time? Because it's the darkest of acts. It's the murder or execution by firing squad. It's done under cover of darkness. You can see the night sky is black. A dark and sombre mood has been created by the artist. And just like Rembrandt, just like any of us who have to light a scene, which is starting out as a black canvas because of the night in this shot, he's had to choose where he's going to put the light. And he's done what I and most other cinematographers like to do, which is to establish the light source so that we understand why it's and how it is motivated. Because if you took this light source, which is like an oversized lamp in a box, which I assume the execution squad has brought in, it's placed on the floor. It's a bit like the limelight, if you've ever seen limelight pictures where they used to light theatres with burning lime on the floor, throw up an eerie light, a spooky light, if you like. In fact, if you are a fan of the horror genre of movies, you'll know that a lot of horror lighting is lit from underneath, and it gives ugly, disturbing shadows and lighting. And he's actually deploying this here. It's throwing this light up onto the victim, and it's illuminating the victim's face, but it's not obviously illuminating the soldiers. Firstly, they have their kind of backs almost to the camera, but it doesn't even light a three-quarter profile of them. They're in darkness. It's a they're part of that dark force in the painting. That's metaphorically represented by the way the artist, or the cinematographer, if you like, has placed the lighting, has brought meaning to the lighting of that shot. As cinematographers, or as painters, it's down to us to have some kind of a say in what costumes people wear. I certainly try and put my oar into the creative process where it comes to costumes. There are things that I like and things that I don't like from a filming point of view. And I guess that he was a bit of a cinematographer, although Goya didn't have cinematography in his day, obviously. But who wouldn't want to put this person in a white shirt like this victim is? He's in a white shirt. What does that do for the frame? It draws the audience's and the viewer's attention to that part of the picture, firstly. Secondly, there's a metaphorical resonance, whiteness, purity, innocence. The painter is asking the audience perhaps to presume that this victim is innocent. And not only that, but it's not a religious painting, but if we go back for a moment to that previous painting, we see the figure of Christ here, just looking like an ordinary Joe. We know it's Christ because of the title of the painting. But he's not dressed in white. There's no representation of the cross there. However, in this painting that we're looking at by Goya, he is in white. He's not Christ, but look how his arms are stretched out. You could put a cross across this figure and have him being crucified. He's not, he's being shot, his arms are out. But metaphorically, there's power in that implication. Great picture. We're going to look at another picture now, which again is using a single source or perhaps two sources of light. It's worth just feasting your eyes on the way that the light is coming in to this frame. You can work out where the light's placed actually, can't we? We can see that there's a shadow falling on this side of the face, under here and down the arm, and the back of the arm is lit. Top of this person's face is lit, and all across his back is lit. So we know that the light is coming in from this side on the left. It's coming in across here, but we can see it's illuminating her cheek, beginning to illuminate her cheek, so it's probably up a little bit. It's probably somewhere here. A single source. It's even catching a couple of people looking in here. Either it's catching those people but not hitting the wall, or behind this wall, which you can just make out, is another window or a lamp which is illuminating them. Either way, the painter has kept the light off the walls so that it just focuses on the action. This was actually painted in 1606, coincidentally Rembrandt's birthday, by the artist Caravaggio. There's a film about him. I'm always trying to avoid lighting walls unless I specifically want them lit. I'm always trying to avoid white walls because any ambient light that gets in there is is reflected by white walls, and it can so easily destroy the mood and the atmosphere that you're trying to create as a cinematographer. But here it is, casting a beautiful light on this horrific scene. God, I seem to have a theme running of awful things happening. The servant girl here is holding a platter, and into that platter will go John the Baptist's head. This is called the beheading of John the Baptist. He was beheaded, and his head was taken up to the wedding, not to the wedding feast, to a feast upstairs, elsewhere in the palace, according to the story. This is the moments before that horror unfolds. Wouldn't it be great, though, if Caravaggio had had film like we've got? Then he could have made this scene come to life. Let's look at another great painter. Similar frame, actually, to the one we just looked at, but this was made years later. The artist is called Storaro, and again you can work out for yourselves where the lights or light is put. We've already seen in the other picture, I said this is similar, but we can see that it's coming in again from the left hand side. It's catching this figure's head, his hand, and this hand holding a bowl. I don't know what it's got in it. Maybe he's washing, and there's some linen and clothes here on the side that just embellish the scene a little bit with some details there. But again, look at the darkness. Look at what isn't lit in this scene. How much mystery there is there. A little bit like the first figure that we saw in the Rembrandt picture, and in the background there, and in the beheading scene where there was a kind of figure looking in through the window. There is another figure, sort of almost hidden in this scene. Lit in the same way, in fact. Over on the right here, if you come through these shadows, you can see this outline, again, a silhouette of a person's face. And again, this has been probably achieved by just uplighting, or just putting a little bit of soft light on this back wall and having the figure sit in front of it so that we get that silhouette. I wonder how frustrated this painter was. Whether he wanted to run the time on this scene and have some dialogue run and some camera moves put into it. If only he'd had film in his day, how would this scene have developed? How would the lighting have changed? What lenses would they put on? So instead of trying to work out what paints to use and where to put the lights, he was thinking on a time scale. What happens next? Which lens do I go to next? Which light do I adjust? How do I build the mood further? How would you have done that?
Have you ever considered any real freedoms? Freedoms in the opinion of others, even the opinions of yourself. They say why. Willard. Why they wanted to terminate my command. I was sent on a classified mission, so it's no longer classified, is it? Did they tell you?
They told me that you had gone totally insane. And that your methods were unsound.
Are my methods unsound? I don't see any method at all. I expected someone like you. What did you expect? Are you an assassin?
I'm a soldier.
You're neither. You're an errand boy, sent by grocery clerks to collect a bill.
This is the wide shot establisher. It's actually a tracking shot. You didn't see it in the clip that I played. But it slowly tracks in over Willard's right-hand shoulder. You can see him silhouetted. We've seen a lot of silhouetting so far with the pictures that we've looked at. He's silhouetted in the doorway through which the key light is coming through. That single light, and it's lighting the planes of the edges of those walls, and the rest is in darkness. You can see how it's lighting this plane of wall here. This is left in darkness, there's a bit of smoke lighting it, and then these planes of this wall here, and a little bit falling onto the right hand side. And then there's one or two little accent lights, little candles or oil lights left there. So as you learn about seeing and painting with light, when you come into this set or this scene as a cinematographer, let's say you hadn't seen it before, it was built by the props department or it's a found location, obviously it won't be lit. So you need to decide where you're going to put your camera, which lenses you're going to choose, and where you're going to place your lights. Here's a frame grab, and this is from the actor's first speech in this scene, really, and it's completely in darkness apart from this one edge here of light where he's caught the light. He's actually come through it, or they've engineered it so he's come through it. If you think about the scene, how the rest of the scene is lit, there's some illogicality to how the light is here. So they've probably changed the lighting setup during the take to give some different effects, and I've played with the light and done 2 or 3 takes and seen which ones have worked, and maybe used different sections which work and left other sections which don't work. And this is just giving a little edge light to his ear, obviously, and there's some outcry at the time about the most expensive actor in the world, Marlon Brando, being paid a huge amount of money to act on screen, and you can't even see his face. Well, not for a large part of the scene anyway. We've talked in some detail about this shot. This is the
wider frame that we come to after we've been to the close-ups of him. I don't know what this lens is. It might be a 24mm or a 35mm. The point is that it's a wide shot. It's another wide establisher shot. And then we go into two close-ups, which are cut very quickly together. The hand washing and the water going onto the head, and there's a very quick cut between two lenses. It looks to me like they're probably on something like an 85mm here, and then they cut to that shot, which is slightly wider. Perhaps it's a 50mm, or they've just come back on the track a little bit, but it's just a quick cut between those two shots, and they cut on the action, so it feels like one shot. When you watch it, you're not necessarily aware that there's two shots there, but it gives you the detail. And if you go back and watch the scene, it cues up, especially this shot cues up this wonderful bit of sound design with the crickets continuing to chirp in the background, and the water then starts playing, and then there's some very subtle sort of musical distorted effects add to this eerie feeling, this otherworldliness. We then go to another shot, a couple of shots where deliberately playing with the lightness and dark, where he just emerges into the light or just disappears back into the shadow, and you still can't work out who this character is or what he looks like, because they're just playing with the light. And there's a very subtly placed, a couple of lights here actually. There's the light which is catching the edge of his nose, and arguably this wall here, but it's catching his nose, and then there's a little eye light just here, and that is just catching his pupil. And when you see it in the film, it just gives you that insight into his character, that gleam in his eye. It's just there momentarily, and it's not until the very end of the scene that we finally see him revealed, although obviously a little bit like that earlier Rembrandt, we've got the light and the darkness. There's a lighter side and a particularly dark side to his character. It's all dark really, but there's the drama of the lighting. So we're looking at ways of seeing, and in a minute I'm going to have one more piece of art, and then we're going to go into some practical ways that you can start training your eye, if you like, which takes a lifetime, and some practical applications as to how you can go about doing some exercises in order to make that happen. Nice shot here of a human eye, and I've got another talk which is about how closely cameras reflect the technology, or the biology if you like, of the human eye. But it's a great shot here, isn't it, in itself? Lovely soft focus on the left, pin sharp on the pupil, probably a macro lens. There's an eye light in the pupil, giving away how this scene has been lit. Looks like a big circular reflector with bounced light coming from it to give that light. But it's all about how you see the world. Final piece of art here is a little pastel drawing, or charcoal drawing, by Edgar Degas of a ballerina, obviously, but it's so delicately done, so delicately lit, if you like, or delicately observed lighting, and I think I like it because it really resonates with painting with light. Admittedly, he's using charcoal, but or chalk, but he's using white chalk here on this grey background, and it just really does feel like he's painting the light on to the top of the hair, across the shoulder, and across the top of the dress. Very delicately done. And he's got a great quotation: "Art is not what you see, but what you make others see." How are you going to get your audience to view the world through your eyes? As cinematographers, we're not particularly interested in showing the audience the world that they know already. We want to show it to them in a new light, So in part 2, we're going to be looking at really practical ways that you can develop your way of seeing as a cinematographer.